My brother sold the mini Ram and got a Silverado. That was fine. It's what happened after that made things worse. I've been gone for some time, but I'm back with a bad one. I've spoken before about how my older brother competed with me needlessly, and he did a lot of beyond stupid shit. Well, he finally pushed the whole family over the edge and got disowned, and I'm going to be explaining a lot of what happened the past year, and then some from before that. But it's too long for one post. Well, going back more than a year. Some may remember my brother getting a free minivan from his ex after the Dodge Ram truck I warned him not to buy became a money pit. I helped him work on that truck and even repaint it. And I helped him remodel his camper trailer too. Why? Because he's my brother. And I guess some part of me deep down kept hoping he'd one day change. But he tried to take credit for things I did, especially with remodeling the camper, and he had tantrums when called out on his lies. He also became temporarily obsessed with my truck, and even implied he'd just take it from me because he hated driving a minivan. He referred to it as a chick car. He acted like a complete child because I refused to trade vehicles, and even got our parents involved. It was just a really stupid and needless situation that my brother tried to make a hill to die on. It started when my brother bought his Dodge Ram, simply because I bought a Toyota Tundra. He had a perfectly running Subaru Baja before that. Then he said he wanted a man's truck, and bought the worst barely running pile he could find that was also overpriced considering the condition. He could have at least aimed for a diesel since he wanted a Dodge so bad. Lots of dumb shit happened after that, including my brother wanting to LS swap the Ram after destroying its engine and two transmissions. But I'm pretty sure the person who offered to do the LS swap for him was a scammer. Not to mention LS swapping any vehicle basically means replacing the ECU, but it never happened anyway since the engine and transmission my brother wanted sold before he could get them, and he had no running vehicle anymore. So my brother's ex, whom he has a young child with, gave him her old 90S Ford Windstar van. It was admittedly an ugly, dent-riddled Paz with the rear window busted out, but it still ran and drove surprisingly well, considering that's not one of Ford's better vehicles. And then my brother decided to cut it up into some sort of van, truck, or a ute as they're called in some places. But he made this thing ugly. Lots of spray foam, recycled wood, and rattle can paint. Even mismatched sublights above the cab. He frequently raided the junkyard for parts, and he even glued a Ram badge onto the grill of that van, truck. He called it the Mini Ram. Lots of stupid cheap mods done to that vehicle too. Someone once asked me how ugly the Mini Ram was on a scale of 1 to 1000, and I said about a 667. My brother did a lot of other dumb things in this time, like following me camping just to piss me off. He was a general leech who stole power from my generator and tried to steal beer from my camper fridge repeatedly. He was so brazen as to just walk right in, and then tried to pretend to be so drunk he didn't realize what he was doing when caught. I've spoken many times about how he stole booze from me, until my friends and I revenge pranked him and his near equally G friends with a growler full of laxative-tainted beer. We admittedly used way too much laxative, but my brother never stole from me again because I threatened to tell everyone about his humiliation. He crapped on his own shoes squatting in the woods, and that's just a bit of it. Eventually my brother seemed to learn his lesson. He sold the Mini Ram to someone who actually paid him well for it. And no, I don't know what they did with it, and I don't care. But when the 2K he sold the Mini Ram for was combined with his savings, my brother had a bit over for 5K to buy a better vehicle with, and he spotted a 99 or WD Silverado truck with an extended cab for sale online. He really shouldn't have sold his only method of transportation before having a replacement vehicle ready. But I couldn't fault him for taking the deal when presented, considering what he sold. And as much as my brother annoyed me, I still cared about him enough to help. He showed up begging me to drive him over 60 miles to look at this truck he found on Marketplace. So I reluctantly drove him out to see this truck. It wasn't that bad actually, save for the rough mismatched paint, the rusty hood, the dents, the cracked windshield, and, actually, I guess it was kinda that bad, but not compared to the clapped-out Ram my brother bought previously. The Silverado had a manual transmission, which we both confirmed shifted great as the records showed it had been rebuilt a few years before. The engine had been swapped at one time too, so it was kinda hard to gauge the odometer as it had not been rolled back for the new engine. It was at about 350,000 miles, but those numbers don't really mean jack when the engine and tranny have been replaced or rebuilt. Admittedly, the engine ran like a top. The tires on the truck were in pretty damn good shape too, and on steel rims, which I like. Very practical. I asked my brother if this was the manly kind of truck he'd been looking for, and for once he spoke logically, and said that he'd rather have this than risk what happened with the Ram again. Fair enough. Besides, Chevy trucks are cool and reliable. I've always liked them. Like a rock, as they say. My brother and I scrutinized this truck in detail like a pair of pawnbrokers, and talked the price down to 3K. They wanted 4K, but we could hear a sound while test driving it that was either bad ball joints or wheel bearings. We jacked up the wheels, and the bearings felt and sounded fine, but the ball joints were pretty bad. And that's not a cheap fix unless you can do it yourself. The truck was owned by the seller's father, who'd passed away a year prior, so the guy took 3K for it, after we listed the problems. After driving it back, I insisted my brother get the truck to a mechanic ASAP, and he listened that time. The mechanic said the ball joints were about to come apart, and it's have caused a very bad situation if they had. And it cost him $1,000 to get them replaced. The truck also needed new plates and the title registered, which ate up a lot of the remaining budget. Then came the paint. My brother wanted the Silverado painted black right away. I told him to wait, but he didn't listen and DI'd some body work, and then rattle-canned it with Rust-Oleum turbo cans. The paint was full of orange peel and overspray. He didn't even use primer, and the truck looked kinda mediocre. Then the southern weather had at it. Already numerous chips, scrapes and fades. Whatever. I stopped caring. You'd think that'd be the end of this part. But no, there's more. What's behind door number 3? If you guessed a dumbass with a knife stuck in his ass, then you'd win the gold. Yeah, that's right. My brother got a knife in his ass. How? How else? He and his friends all got high and decided they were gonna go outside and build a fort in the backyard of the house they rent out of scrap they found laying around. My brother, while stoned, wanted to show off how he can flip out a butterfly knife really fast, and decided he was gonna act like he was in an action movie, and did some sort of stupid thing where he was running and flipping out the knife really fast. The ground was wet, he slipped, and somehow got the knife in his right butt cheek. They called me to come take him to the hospital because they were all too stoned to drive. I had to lay my brother down in the bed of my truck on a mattress because we were too scared to pull the knife out, and I drove him to the hospital like that. They rushed him in, and thankfully he only needed about 5 stitches on his butt and some antibiotics. Then I drove him back home the same way, and he insisted I take him to a drive-thru. He also tried to get me to pay, because reasons. I told him to buy his own damn food. Later that there was more dumb BS that I won't bother getting into. But eventually my brother was seemingly getting better, less bad. He was a bit sore his Silverado wasn't a 4x4, and my Tundra is. But being our WD kept him from trying to take it off-roading. He did try once, and had to pull the truck out of mud with a come along. And he didn't try it again. He did want to drag race my truck again too. I said hell no, not gonna risk either of our piles breaking down. And he was a complete ditch about that too. I told him to stop acting like his dick was bigger than it is, and act his age. He didn't take that well, but he seemingly really was improving, even being a much better dad to his daughter. Things got pretty good for him, until I decided to buy a house. That's when the serious drama started.